You are now listening to Extracting Wisdom. Here to help you prevent the decay of your future is your host, Brandon Everett.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Extracting Wisdom, the podcast designed to help prevent the decay of your future. My name is Brandon Everett, and I hope everyone listening is having a great day. Today, we're going to be talking about something that almost every single dental student out there is dealing with in some way, shape, or form, and that is loans and the debt that comes along with it. So joining me on the show today is Mr. Travis Hornsby, who founded Student Loan Planner after helping his physician wife navigate ridiculously complex student loan repayment decisions. To date, Student Loan Planner has consulted on over $500 million in student debt. Travis is a chartered financial analyst and brings his background as a former bond trader, trading billions of dollars. He brings that same intensity to analyzing the best repayment paths for graduate degree professionals with six figures of student loan debt. Student Loan Planner has helped over 2,000 clients collectively save over $100 million on student loans, and he's been featured in things like U.S. News, Business Insider, Forbes, Huffington Post, Millennial Dentist, and much more. So Travis, thank you so much for being on the show today. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me on the show, Brandon. You make us sound probably a lot better than we are.
Yeah, of course. I'm glad you're on the show today. This is such an important topic, especially for our listeners here who are either thinking about going into dentistry or in dental school currently. So Travis, why don't we start just telling us how you got into student loans and kind of the transition you made from trading bonds?
Yeah, I used to be kind of a slinger of paper, I call it. We were throwing around billions of dollars, buying and selling, managing portfolios for people that needed tax-exempt bonds, which is people that make a lot of money. And I did that for, a while, a few years, and just felt like it wasn't necessarily my calling. And I got really into this idea of early retirement, financial independence. So I took some of that bond trader money and traveled the world for a little while and met my wife right before I left the city that I was working in. So I had booked the tickets, met a girl, kind of unexpectedly, wasn't planning on it. And then we started dating while I was traveling. And then she wanted me to come back to where she got a job. So she got a job in St. Louis just because randomly that was the academic hospital that decided to give her a job that she liked. So she's like, hey, I want you to move where I'm at. So okay, I was like, all right, I got to do it. I don't have a choice,
Right.
This is the girl for me, so I got to do it. So I moved there and didn't have to work, but was basically was a little bored. And then her father gave me an ultimatum if I wanted his blessing for the wedding that I had to get a stable income with a stable job.
Of course.
And so, or else. And I didn't want to know what else was, I didn't want to find out. So I ended up doing something that I had done for her and her friends, which is figure out their student loans. And I decided to turn it into more of a serious business. And so just the need was so great out there, and the sort of math-based, Excel-based modeling and understanding of loans is I guess something a little bit unique compared to what some other groups might offer, just the other groups, being, payback, right? That's right. The solution. So I think that just kind of fulfilled the market need, and I really enjoyed it. And that's kind of how we ended up advising thousands of people, was just creating content around everything that people are going through out there. And boy, oh boy, it is a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this is becoming a bigger and bigger problem by the year. The rising tuition, it's can potentially turn future dentists or future med students or future, physician assistants away from the career that they really want to pursue because of this huge mountain of debt. So what do you see as kind of the average debt range for dental students?
It typically ranges from $80,000 for somebody with a health profession scholarship that decided to commit to the military for a few years at the low end, or somebody with maybe a 200 to 300K balance at a public dental school that, is in a low cost of living area, was pretty frugal during school, and then probably I would say the middle right now is around 300 to 350 is kind of the new median for, just everybody around the country, I think. I think the numbers are a little underreported perhaps as to what the real median is, but I think it's probably around 350 would be my guess. And then the highest end of the range is, if you go to a higher cost public school, you're probably like 400, 450. If you're at a higher, kind of private school, it's probably going to be around that same number. And then if you're sort of in the higher cost private schools, which also happen to have the largest class sizes, it's more like 600, like USC, NYU, And that's actually grown even more than that. So like some of the new grads coming out of like NYU and USC are more in the 650 range. So that is a staggeringly high amount of debt.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And it seems to me that it affects dental students more so than med students. I got a couple buddies that I talk about, and we kind of talk about different numbers and loans and things like that. And it doesn't seem to be, the balances that they have don't seem to be as high as what dental students are experiencing.
Yeah, that's true. Now, part of the reason is a lot of rich guys want to put their name on the side of a building that teaches med students, but nobody really cares about doing that for dental students, right? There's sort of a prestige differential with that. But I think the reason for that is, yes, medical schools get more support than dental schools do by and large. The other thing is, med schools, when you graduate, you go to training, you finish your training, a lot more people that go to med school end up being employed by big hospital systems. And we have a loan program called Public Service Loan Forgiveness right now that gives tax-free forgiveness after 10 years of payments based on your income to anybody that works in one of these big hospital systems. So the only way to get not-for-profit employment as a dentist is typically to work in a prison system or, some sort of community health center where you're doing just fill and drill dentistry and just you're wearing yourself out. Whereas you can have some really nice, relaxing, relatively relaxing. I don't want to get in trouble here, but just in case you have physician listeners, but, fairly relaxing, all things considered, jobs at these not big, hospital systems if you're a physician, right? So also the residency and the fellowships count for that, whereas a lot of times dentists are taking out debt during, residency or some sort of like program like that to become more specialized. So you've got these kind of inequities in the professions that I don't know if it's, everybody likes to joke, like maybe I blame the ADA too much, like everybody likes to make ADA the bogeyman. I think, why not? Let's blame the ADA, even though we don't have like perfect evidence as to, it's the fact that it's them. But I think maybe what it is just the American Medical Association was just sharper than the ADA and negotiated the last round of the Higher Education Act really, really well and got a bunch of loopholes and carve-outs for physicians that probably were very well thought through by them. So because of that, you get these situations where a lot of these physicians are paying like $100,000 to $150,000 on their medical school debt over 10 years and getting the rest wiped away. Whereas dentists have to, kind of let themselves use the 20 or 25-year plans, and then you have to pay income taxes on the forgiven balance at the end of the 20-something years. So it's definitely a sort of a difference. The thing is I would say dentists have probably more downside than physicians, but they also do have, in some cases, more upside because it's a little bit tougher as a physician to, be super successful setting up a bunch of private practices than it is as a dentist.
Right. Absolutely. That's one of the turn-ons for dentistry. For a lot of people is you still kind of have that option to, or it's easier definitely to set up your own practice, over the medical side of things. But so tell me, obviously a lot of people when they're going through school, and dental students specifically, are nervous about this massive amount of debt that they're taking on. And it's scary. It's nerve-wracking. But that's why we have you here. Thank goodness we have you here to talk about, student loan planner. So just kind of take us through the basic process of how this company operates and what they can do for the dental student.
Yeah. We have pre-debt consulting. Like people can hire any one of or hire our consultants for like a $300 session before school, but usually the pain is just really not very bad. And so not very many people take us up on that. Everybody contacts us after the pain is really bad. So think about it like your patients, are they going to show up to the practice, preventatively when you could have done a lot of things to fix it? Are they going to show up in deep pain with like, just terrible things going on in their mouth that, they'll pay anything to fix, right? So That's kind of what happens with our business. So the vast majority of our business is people who already have debt versus people who are still in school. What we tell people in school is to finish. That's the best advice I can give somebody is don't worry about the debt. Take all federal loans unless you know for sure that you're going to pay it back in full, in which case you could consider some private loans. But, focus like mostly on taking federal loans and just finish. Okay. Because if you do those two things, you will be okay. Okay. Dentistry is not pharmacy. Pharmacy is an epic train wreck headed for a nuclear bomb. Like, that's grossly exaggerating things, but pharmacists are having a lot of problems getting jobs right now. And so that field is something that will collapse a lot sooner than dentistry will. Now, I think dentistry still could because you're producing twice as many dentists as there were, 10 years ago, I think. So you've got an oversupply of dentists in many areas of the country. So if your plan is to be, a hotshot dentist in Los Angeles, you probably have better chances of being an actor. I mean, I'm joking a little bit, but honestly, like dentistry is the kind of profession for somebody who doesn't hate the idea of a stable life, living in a kind of smaller town with a kind of consistent presence, a cornerstone presence in the community. And, you like the idea of not having a bunch of competition breathing down your neck by operating in a more out of the way or niche market. So some of the richest dentists that I know, one guy focuses only on doing certain kinds of treatments for kids with Medicaid, because it reimburses well. And, he carves out a niche for a population that's underserved. Another guy does, just every procedure imaginable for this community that's 100 miles away from the nearest one in northern Minnesota, So you have these kind of smaller or out of the way places. Like if you want to be in a big city, you need some sort of niche that makes you different from all the other dentists on every street corner. Right.
Absolutely.
And then in the smaller cities, you don't have to be as differentiated. You're just the only dentist around. So you don't have a lot of, things to worry about, So just to give you kind of a range, because I know people love ranges and hearing examples. So I've had people producing, struggling to produce $300,000 or $400,000 in saturated areas with overhead of, 70 or 80%. That's the worst kind of situation. The best kind of situations, I've seen people producing revenues of over $2 million shortly out of dental school. The people that were at the bottom end of the spectrum were in places like DC, San Francisco, New York. The people at the top end of the spectrum were in places like, Iowa, Oklahoma, some of these more random places, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So obviously practice location is a huge thing. And I was actually just listening to you earlier today on the episode you did with the millennial dentist. And, a big topic of conversation was corporate dentistry and kind of what your thoughts were on that. So, and I know corporate dentistry is something that a lot of dental students, some might find attractive and others not so much. So what are your thoughts on that route?
I think it has a role, right? It has a role for patients and for doctors. Look, I think corporate dentistry is a great first job. I don't think it should be your job, for 80% of the profession. Alternatively, you could make it, kind of a situation where you could use it as a lifestyle decision. So say you want to work part-time, or you want to work weird hours, or you just want to manage the level of interaction you have with your office because you have other things going on in your life that you care more about, like family or hobbies or whatever it is, right? Corporate dentistry can be fantastic for that because it's a plug and play, solution where you're a cog in the machine, so to speak, and you're going to come in and do exactly according to the procedure list, and you're going to follow all of their rules, and that's it. And, honestly, like for some people, that's great. I remember one of the jobs I had once in my life, it's like I had to be very focused from, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., but I did not have to take any work home with me at all. And I couldn't even if I tried. And it was okay, and I could see, people that have a certain focus on their, for a certain focus, having that be a great job for them. So to me, when you're working for a corporate dental group, you cede control, and you're going to take home anywhere from 25 to 35% of production of what you produce. Okay. If you work for yourself, more likely than not, you're going to bring home 40% to 60% of what you produce, depending on what your overhead is. So, when you're, the numbers there are that you could take home anywhere from, 15 to 30% of revenues extra if you own the practice versus work for somebody else. And the risk of a dental practice is probably about 0.3%. So in other words, 3 in 1,000 dentists typically fail to pay it back, according to some of the bankers that I talked to. So that's just an indication that for, a very, very small risk, you could get an additional 50 to 100% income on the average dental, case, average dentist, basically.
Right. That's a good figure to know. I like this. So people that want to start their practice, start their own practice out of school, it's that's a good feeling.
Yeah. No, you should do startup. I mean, startups are far less risky in dentistry than other places. I will say, I know that you live in Chicago, right? You're in the state of Illinois. So the good news is Illinois right now is a buyer's market for dental practices because dentists are fleeing in droves, to other states because, the state sometimes doesn't even pay them for 2 years for Medicaid patients. I've seen some stories about that, how, the dentists have to sell, receivables to investors because they don't get reimbursed for years from the state. So, but in that kind of a situation, like I bet you could do really, really well in Illinois. I think that in certain kind of, situations, if you were far enough away from Chicago, if you're in one of these underserved areas, if you developed a certain kind of, practice maybe that avoids any money paid to you by the state of Illinois, right? Or alternatively, you have a great pool of savings where you can afford to wait out the receivables. That's the other thing is fewer and fewer dentists might actually accept, payments from a state that's struggling. And so then, you might be able to carve out a niche for yourself as the only person in the whole county that'll take this,
Right.
So that's kind of the niche play. So I think that, startups are okay to do if you have 30,000 in the bank plus 6 months expenses. That's the advice that I tend to try to give people. So obviously if you're going to do a startup, holy cow, get your expenses down. Don't be a dumb doctor and go get, your expenses racked up with a mortgage, a car lease, all these things when you're trying to be lean, mean, and hungry and try to make your business get off the ground, right? So that's the other thing is if you want that lifestyle of dentistry, the comfortable, Porsche lifestyle of dentistry, you can have that, but just know that you probably can't have that plus a startup lifestyle where, you have this really high ceiling and you have a lot less debt on your practice that you're taking out to get started. If you want the more stable lifestyle, then an acquisition is really good. You can do an acquisition despite having 500 grand of student loans. Did you know that? All you need is proof that you can produce. So kick butt in your first job,
right?
And then get a lot of money saved in the bank. And don't worry about your student loans as long as they're on pay or repay, one of the two repayment programs.
Right.
And, you can still become a multimillionaire as a dentist. Is it harder than other professions? Yeah, you can do much better, but you can also do much worse, right? So the band of kind of outcomes is a lot larger than if you went into medicine where it's like, go this path, this path, this path, and you get this degree program, you're going to work at this hospital system and make, $200,000 a year for, inflation adjusted for the rest of your life. Like that is a very predictable path, whereas dentistry now is a path where you could have a lot of good and bad outcomes.
So here's something too, because this podcast really does aim toward like the current dental student right now. And obviously student loan planner kind of comes in more towards the end of dental school and as we're graduating like new dentists. But do you have any advice off the top of your head of things that dental students can be doing while they're in school to minimize debt or really set themselves up for financial success?
Sure. So if you're going to become a practice owner and make a lot of money and you're interested in doing really well, right?
Right.
Then let's say you're going to have around 200 to 350,000 of debt when you graduate. So that's the kind of person that should try to keep their debt minimized as much as possible. Particularly if your debt is in the 200,000 range, you might even consider using some private loans to, take those out instead of Grad Plus loans. Grad Plus loans are the most expensive, worst loans on the federal system. The problem, though, is if you take out private loans when you're going to go for forgiveness because you have more than 300,000 or 350K in debt, then taking out private loans is a disaster because you're just replacing loans that would have been forgiven with loans that have to be paid back in full. So I think for the student in school, you just need to figure out do you think you're going to actually pay all your debt off or are you not? And the way to think about this is take your amount that you think you're going to graduate with, 1% of that should in your head be a monthly payment that you'll have to make.
Okay.
So for example, if you have 200,000, pretend you have to pay 2,000 a month when you graduate. If you have 300,000, you have to pay 3,000 a month when you graduate. Well, if you're going to graduate with 120K of income, you'll take home 90. If you're going to have 300K of debt, do you want 3,000 a month going to your student loans? So that's what I'm talking about when I'm saying be careful about what kind of debt you borrow while you're in school, because if you're going to borrow that 200,000 something level, then sure, take out some private loans, like to keep the interest costs lower, really be really frugal, try to minimize what you're borrowing. And then when you graduate, you could refinance it to a 20-year term to minimize that monthly payment, because that's the most important thing when you graduate for the first few years is minimizing the monthly payment so you can focus on other things like buying a practice.
Okay. Right.
So, but I will say this, for the person who borrows over 350K, as long as you're going to be one of these dentists that's making under 200 or 250 after write-offs, which is 95% of dentists, then frankly, this is going to sound terrible, but you don't need to worry about what you borrow. You don't even need to worry about being frugal. In fact, I've had some people say, wow, I wish I took out the max so I could have paid my car off and had an emergency fund to start my career with. And the simple reason for that is because once you've reached a certain debt to income ratio, your debt should be thought of as a tax and not a debt. So if you're going to pay 10% of your income for 20 years on something, that's a better deal if you have a whole ton of debt relative to your income than if you have a debt to income ratio that's kind of modest. So for example, if you have 200,000 in debt, you make 200,000 a year, you're going to pay 2,000 a month for 10 years to pay it off. So you can pay 2,000 a month for 10 years, or you can do kind of a pay as you earn plan. And so maybe you'll pay 2,000 a month, but for 20 years,
right?
Because it's kind of a 10% kind of thing, right? So in that scenario, you'd much rather just pay the debt off and be done with it.
Right.
Yeah. So the worst case scenario though is if your debt is, let's say it's 650,000 because you went to NYU. Well, if you're making 200,000, let's say your payment's 2,000 a month. Well, it's 10% of your income. So general rule of thumb, right? It's actually going to be less than 2,000 a month. I'm just doing it because the math's easy.
Right.
But so 2,000 a month on a 600K loan balance. Well, what if you took out some private loans in school? Well, your payment on the federal loans would be the exact same no matter what you borrowed. And so you would have just added, an extra 1,000 or 2,000 a month on top of that payment if you took out private loans. So that's why it's toxic for dentists that are probably borrowing more than 300K in most cases to take out private loans for school. Whereas if you're going to end up with less than that, might not be too terrible of a decision.
Okay. Got it. And I saw on your website too, want to make sure everybody listening knows about this free resource that you have on the website is your, is it loan calculator that you have?
Yeah. So anybody can download that. That's actually the ones we use in the paid consult.
Okay.
Which, we give it away because I'm confident that 90% of people won't understand it anyway. So, no offense, we've got a lot of really smart readers, but not everybody is, trained in Excel and understands financial math. And frankly, I don't understand root canals,
Right,
so,
of course.
so download it and play around with it. You'll get a lot out of it. I think, most people that, really look at it and study it will kind of get a lot of understanding just by looking at it. So yeah, people can go to our site and download that for free, like you mentioned.
Okay. And just on like a very basic level, what does the calculator help students with? What's the kind of output?
Yeah. So yeah, you can download the calculator and you'll see the cost of different income-driven repayment plans. You'll see refinancing costs. You'll see what the tax bomb estimate could be. And you'll get, an idea of what your life could look like. Even if you wanted to retire at 40, it'll project how much you'd have to save to reach something like that. So it's pretty useful.
Awesome. And so tell me, this is, I haven't really looked too much into this, but what is exactly like loan forgiveness? What is the timeline on that of when your loans are forgiven?
It's 20 years for most dentists with pay as you earn. So that's the typical timeline. So after graduation, you'd consolidate it and get a direct consolidation loan, and then you'd pay for 20 years. And then at the end of the 20 years, it's forgiven, but you have to pay income taxes on that forgiveness. So if you think about it, most people could still be in a pretty good setup because you graduate at 26, you get out your practice loan maybe at, 28 to 30. And so you're debt free on your practice by say 40. And then at 46, you're debt free from your student loans because you owe a big tax bomb. And, you could put aside maybe $500 to $1,000 a month into a Vanguard account. And as long as you do that every month, then you'll have enough to pay your tax bomb in most every case. Probably 95% of cases that I see, a tax bomb of $500 to $1,000 a month in a mutual fund, like an index fund. As long as you commit to it and do it long term, that gets it done. So you could be debt free from your practice and your student loans by 46. And then you could also maybe get a 15-year mortgage. Maybe you start with a 30-year, when you're doing your practice, just to make sure that your payment is manageable. Once you've got your practice, you feel pretty stable in life, you could refinance to a 15-year. And then you could pay your debt off, your mortgage debt off early as well, just to be, completely debt free. So most dentists, even ones that are graduating with these horrific loan balances, could actually be debt free in their mid 40s. And then once you're debt free in your mid 40s, most dentists are going to have an extra 15 to 20 year working career after that. Right. So 15 to 20 years of no mortgage, no practice loan, no student loan living is kind of the dream. So, your first half of your career for a typical dentist is going to be paying back debt and not stressing about it and making sure that you have a good savings rate, you have good financial habits, you don't spend too much in cars and houses.
Right. Right.
And divorces. For men,
right.
That's what Howard Friend always says. So, so you focus on those kind of things and then you'll have a good life. The main things you're going to run into are going to be, how big of a practice did you buy? Did you buy, a lousy practice with 300K in revenues? Did you buy a humming practice on 800K in revenues? Did you live in an attractive area for dentistry? Are you good with people? Like, do people enjoy talking to you?
Right.
Those kind of things will matter more.
Okay. And so here's another question too. Does having debt from dental school or loans from dental school affect your ability to take out loans for a startup?
Yes and no. If you have a refinanced loan that is a really high monthly payment, then yes, it could. So
Okay.
I do see some situations where people refinance. It's usually to 5 or 7 year terms, and the monthly payment going to debt is too high for them to qualify for mortgages and practice loans.
I see.
So
Okay.
I would say that's a particular danger for dentists. So you generally want to stick to a very long repayment term until you've got those big purchases behind you. And then once those things are behind you, the student loan refinancing companies are really going to go based off of your income, your credit score. So they're not going to care that you have a bunch of debt from other sources. They're just going to care that you're a dentist with a good income and a good credit score. So
Right.
that's why you want to be a little careful there. The main thing that'll derail a startup is not having enough cash in the bank and not having a good business plan. You don't need a great one. You just need one that makes sense.
Okay. Got it. Sorry, I'm bombarding you with questions here, but
that's the name of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully I'm learning from you as well. Hopefully I'm sure our listeners are going to learn something as well. But when we refinance our loans, a lot of us will also have debt from undergrad, obviously. Is that going to be included in that loan as well? Should we refinance all of our loans?
Yes. I mean, you generally need to either refinance all of it or none of it. There's
Okay.
not a great reason to do half and half. It just
Right.
creates duplicate payments. So I would say yes. Most cases undergrad debt is $30,000, give or take 10. So, sometimes people have Parent Plus loans from parents that they want to take on too. That
Right.
should always be evaluated as a separate thing. I've had a couple dentists that have had parents with hundreds of thousands of Parent Plus loans they took out. And
Okay.
that can actually be a bad idea to take that debt on, because sometimes you can have your parents get a very low income driven payment on their Parent Plus loans, So every case is somewhat unique, even though there's, some rules of thumb, like go for forgiveness if you owe more than, 1.5 times your income, refinance if you have less, if you live in, the West Coast, you need to be aware that there's some weird community property rules that cause problems. So, if you have a stay-at-home spouse, you might be able to take advantage of some loopholes if you live on the West Coast.
Okay.
So there's a lot of really weird nuances to this stuff. But the good news is I've never seen a case where a dentist has been totally screwed as long as they're willing to, fix the non-loan parts of their lives.
Okay. Yeah. So here I talked to you about this very briefly. I do have some questions about my kind of situation, just very baseline, just want to get your advice and your thoughts here. So I have some undergrad debt. I'll say, I don't know if I'll include this in the show or not, but I have about $95,000 in undergrad debt. And I am on the military HPSV scholarship. And my loans have already been deferred 4 years because I'm a student. And you have the option to defer loans again for active military service. Is that something I should do while I'm in the military, or should I start paying off my loans while I'm in the military?
Well, I don't think you have to worry too much about including it in the show because, most people want to, steal the identities of people that have all those assets,
Right.
They're not trying to steal the 95,000 of debt. Right. But the 95,000, what is the composition between federal and private approximately? Like you get a rough percentage.
I would say, I would say most of it is through Discover. And then I do have pretty much the max I could have taken out for federal.
So you probably have about 30,000 of federal and 65,000 from Discover.
Yeah, that's a good.
So the 30K is going to be Stafford loans. The Discover loans are probably going to be at an interest rate between like 6 and 10%.
Okay. Yeah.
Is just my guess. So now, do you have any loans from dental school, or is the military covering everything?
Everything's covered.
Okay. So your 65K loans are private and they're ugly, terrible loans. They're for a, broke down, beat up Porsche that's not even worth a tenth of that, right? So that's what you want to think about that Discover loan as being.
Okay.
The reality is with that debt to income ratio, as a military dentist, when you graduate, you'll probably make around $100,000.
Right.
Probably, give or take, maybe 80 to 120, something like that.
Yeah.
So you'll have the debt to income ratio certainly to refinance at least the federal loan.
Okay.
Sorry, the private loan, the Discover loan. Now the $30K federal loan, if they'll let you keep it in deferment, for the subsidized loans, it might not be too bad of an idea to do that.
Okay.
For the unsubsidized loans, I would probably include those in the refinancing, and I'd probably refinance it initially to a 20-year term.
Right.
The one thing that I can say about the subsidized loans is it might be easier just to go ahead and just refinance the whole thing, because you're only talking about $95K. That's
Right.
really pretty modest. You're going to be making decent money as a military dentist, getting your housing covered. So you're
Right.
going to have a lot of disposable income. So probably if it was me, I'd probably refinance it to a 20-year term to start, just to keep the payment kind of low, and then throw tons of money at it, like probably half my salary after taxes. I'd probably throw at the debt in my first year, and then
Okay.
the other next year I'd throw the other half of it out there, unless there's some sort of military student loan repayment benefit in addition to the fact that they're paying for dental school that you could benefit from. Otherwise, I don't see really a good benefit of keeping that amount of debt around. I would rather get rid of that debt and then be the envy of all your dental school classmates.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's a good plan. Something else too, because I really try to be financially conscious and kind of trying to set myself up to be, in the best financial situation, I guess, as possible. And a lot of times a Roth comes up. Okay. But I have heard the difference between and there's a certain salary cutoff for a Roth IRA. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's like 100 something thousand, depending on if you're single or married.
Got it. Okay. So I'm hesitant to start one now, because if I were to start one now, kind of my salary would shift once I graduate and I'm in the military. I'm assuming that salary would be above the Roth IRA, kind of salary cutoff. So is it worth it to start a Roth IRA? Can you convert a Roth IRA into like a backdoor Roth IRA, or should I just wait until I have like a stable job? I guess.
Yeah, you can always do like a backdoor Roth IRA if you make too much money pretty easily. So as a military dentist, you're going to qualify for a Roth IRA every single year you're in the service. So you're just not going to make enough money to cross that threshold. So, the other thing I'd say is, if you have no student loan benefits, a lot of people out there can benefit from an indirect match in their 401ks or their IRAs by doing the pre-tax versions, because they get their taxable income lower. And so they get a write-off so that they get a lower student loan payment. So since you're not pursuing an income-driven forgiveness option, then you don't have that benefit. So if you're in the military, a lot of people will try to figure out a way to list their residence in like Texas or something, to get the no state income taxes,
Right.
So if you're ever able to swing that, your federal tax rate will probably be around 22%. So certainly you could justify doing a Roth in those situations. So, you would probably do a Roth IRA, and then you could also consider even doing the Roth TSP, which is a after tax now for tax-free when withdrawing it, way to put in, instead of $6,000 a year, you can put in $19,000 a year.
Wow.
So that's really an amazingly higher benefit to put that money away into the Roth, TSP. It's one of the big benefits of being a military dentist, is having access to really good retirement plans. That said, what I've determined from doing a lot of modeling is it honestly doesn't matter that much if you utilize the Roth.
Okay.
And the reason for that is savings rate is way more important than what kind of accounts you use.
Okay.
Earning a lot and saving a lot will have far more impact than did you use the Roth or the traditional. So everybody wants to debate, these sort of minutia about finances, and it's a good thing to discuss, but most dentists just need to focus on maxing all their, accounts for retirement.
Okay.
So just max them. Even if you pick the wrong one, don't worry about it too much. Just max them.
Okay.
And then open a brokerage account with a place like Vanguard if you want to do it yourself, and then a place like a robo-advisor like Betterment or Charles Schwab or something like that, or fee-only fiduciary financial planner if you don't want to do it yourself.
Okay.
But just start both of those accounts and put every dollar you can in them, or alternatively pay off your debt super aggressively, like we're talking about doing for you.
Right.
Funnel the money in there once the debt's gone. Either one of those strategies work fine. Could you have ended up a little wealthier if you did one in a certain order over the other? Yeah, sure. But the problem is, within, kind of the same savings rate, these kind of decisions might add or subtract a year to your working career, but upping your savings rate might cut your working career by 5 to 10 years.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So as we kind of start wrapping it up here, how can listeners find you and find Student Loan Planner? Where can they go?
Yeah, studentloanplanner.com. Go to our blog. So that's in the menu bar of our blog. You can also just check out studentloanplanner.com/blog, and you'll be able to type in dentist in the search bar there. And you can also check out the dentist category. I guess on our homepage, if you scroll down, we even have a link to the dentist articles that we have on our site. And we've written more for dentists than probably any other profession, just because of all the nuances involved with things. So I would suggest for the folks in dental school that that's where you should start. You're not going to be able to really get a ton of benefit from hiring us right now. You're going to want to wait until you graduate. If you're already a dentist, then you would benefit a lot by hiring us right now. And if that's you, then studentloanplanner.com/help would be the information that you'll need to set up a consult with one of our CFP or CFA consultants. So it's, it's a few $100. It's a lot cheaper than working with a, financial planner, just because we like to focus on doing an excellent job and doing a lot of these plans instead of, having, 100 super rich dentists we're charging like 10 grand a year on. That's kind of like the model for a lot of these financial planners,
Right.
So I'd rather just make a huge impact on thousands of dentists at, a lower price point.
Right. I mean, it's a great thing that you're doing too. And hopefully people realize that the $100 that you spend, or, a couple $100, it's going to make a huge difference. It's going to save you a lot more than that in the long run.
Yeah. I mean, we have cases where people needed to be filing taxes a certain way because they were in a weird state with weird, marriage rules, and it saved them 20 grand a year.
Wow.
So that's not necessarily all the time. Sometimes it's only a couple grand a year.
Right.
But sometimes it's nothing, so it depends. That's why we charge the flat fee. So you know exactly what it is. And, you can go into it knowing that by the end, you'll at least have a lot less anxiety about your debt. That I can promise for sure. In most cases, you'll also save a lot of money too.
Right. Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing for a lot of dental students is that going through dental school with that anxiety. So it's really nice to know that you are a resource, and Student Loan Planners a resource where you can help kind of alleviate some of that anxiety and stress about, the future and loans and debt.
Yeah. And if you're broke, check out our podcast on iTunes, Student Loan Planner podcast. Just search our name and you'll find us. And that's a lot of people say they listen to it every week because it calms them down. They don't have regular freak out sessions.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. So and I'll find the links to all of that, up to the website and that dental help page in the podcast, and I'll put them in my show notes so people can find you and take a listen to all of your content as well.
Thank you so much, Brandon. So listeners, just keep your head up. Don't get down. Don't get discouraged. You're in a great profession. You're going to have to make some sacrifices, but anybody does. And your sacrifices are going to result in you being a top 1% income earner if you play your cards right. And, 99% of America doesn't have that opportunity. And, the vast majority of the rest of the world doesn't either.
Right. Absolutely. Well, Travis, thanks so much for being on the show. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing some wisdom with us and helping us get more prepared for our future careers. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Brandon.
Take care.